I'm Addison Smith with Campus Reform. It's an honor to be joined today by my former boss, Ryan Helfenbein, at my former school, Liberty University, in my former workplace, the Standing for Freedom Center. Ryan Helfenbein, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, Addison, thank you. My honor, man. Glad you're back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always great to come back and visit. It's always a trip down memory lane. We're in the Standing for Freedom Center. It's not an old center, but it's also not brand new. Give us a rundown for our audience who might not know what the Standing for Freedom Center is. Why do you guys exist?
Yeah, so we exist to defend life, liberty, and truth, to ensure freedom exists for the next generation. Our focus really is next gen. We're obviously on the campus of Liberty University. And we also are at that kind of intersect between the church and the public square. One of the things that we have an emphasis on is making sure that Christians are dealing ethically, biblically, when it comes to issues facing maybe their First Amendment freedoms, everything else. So the Freedom Center really exists for a largely evangelical audience and those outside the university as well as inside the university.
And like you said, it is based out of here in Lynchburg, Virginia, Liberty University.
Yeah.
It has a pretty impressive online platform. You guys reach, no doubts, hundreds of thousands of people through all of your social medias and surely college students across the rest of the country. So it's not just here. What is, when we talk about other students, conservative students at other campuses across the country, obviously Liberty is kind of the last of a dying breed of good conservative schools. So what message does the Freedom Center have for students on campuses nationwide?
I would say hold the line, be courageous, be strong and courageous. You're not alone. I think of the end of 1 Kings when Elijah is going before the Lord, and right after he had defeated the prophets of Baal there on Mount Carmel, and the Lord had given a mighty sign, consumed the sacrifice on the altar, and it was burning. And then after that, he was hunted down, right? And so he's coming to the end of the road, and he's saying to the Lord, like, I'm alone. I'm the only one that's here. And the Lord then responds, absolutely not, Elijah. There are 7,000 who have not bowed or bent the knee to Baal, that he's reserved a remnant. I think the reality that we're facing in this country, there is no doubt that, there is we're fast coming upon a post-Christian society. Now, that has everything to do with us. It's not about what the government does. It has everything to do about how we impact and interface with culture. It's really about us. It's about our faithfulness and whether we're going to abandon the public square or we're going to be running into it, swinging. And I really believe this is a moment of opportunity. Sometimes the greatest moments of crisis and challenge produces the greatest moments of opportunity. So we really do exist not only for a Liberty student, but for students all across the country who are saying, hey, I'm here and I'm not alone, and people are all kind of saying that. I'm here and I'm not alone. We exist to speak strength to them, courage, as well as conviction.
And obviously, Freedom Center, very gospel-centered, Liberty University, gospel-centered, Christ-centered. It is an evangelical Christian center, an evangelical Christian school. But broadening that out a little bit, the conservative movement isn't quite as monolithic. We have Protestants, Catholics, Jews, even Mormons, among other many different religions, worldviews, backgrounds, but they're all kind of united under this umbrella of the conservative movement. So how does the Freedom Center, what message do they give that is a uniting glue to people who come from other backgrounds and other walks of life that might not be Southern Baptist or Protestant Christian like Liberty University is?
Right. Great question. I think about this particular moment in our country where our freedoms are being challenged more than ever before. And in that list, you didn't even mention atheists who are co-belligerent with us.
I thought about it.
Yeah,
I thought about it.
there are atheists out there that are saying, oh my goodness, I don't want to see the church closed down the street from me. I don't want to see the Christian school go out of business. I don't want to see monuments where the Ten Commandments are being defaced. There are actually some who believe that those are integral parts to Western society and Western civilization that has flourished for well over 500 years. There is no doubt this was a Protestant nation when it started. at its founding. It was there's no doubt that when this nation was started, the pulpits of this country were far more influential than the Enlightenment philosophers that might have been read and shared among the elites of society, the aristocracy. But by and large, it was the preachers, it was the missionaries, the ministers, the circuit riders, the revivalists. Those were the ones that were shaping the public conscience of our country.
De Tocqueville recognized that.
Yeah, that's right. In the early 1800s, Max Weber later on, when he was doing the Protestant work ethic, we had a French philosopher sociologist who was looking at our country, as well as a German philosopher and sociologist looking at this country. And the uniqueness of America, whether you want to describe that as American exceptionalism, I think that's an appropriate term, but the uniqueness of America is unquestioned in our history. So I see whether it be Liberty University or even the larger sort of conservative movement, as a part of that plays the moral part and the spiritual component that reminds and calls people's attention back to the fact that the foundations of freedom are begun by God and not by any human institution. It is for freedom that Christ set us free. Spiritual freedom is really the fountain and the root of political freedom. So when you're asking, are we a part of a larger coalition, a larger movement? Absolutely. We can join and lock arms with many people who would say, you know what? I don't agree with your faith, but I'll defend your right to say it and to share it publicly. And we can build coalitions around that all day, every day.
And that's something I think the left does really good, is coalition build, where you have, liberals to far left libertarian, but they're all kind of able to unite together to push through their agenda. So it's nice to see that conservatives are able to do the same with their different backgrounds and religions. One thing, our mission at the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform is to expose liberal bias and abuse on college campuses. We've written over 11,000 stories over the past 10 years exposing just that, is this blatant imbalance of liberal bureaucracy on college campuses. And Liberty University is well known as one of the most conservative Christian schools in the country. But as I was a student here not too long ago and lived on campus, was part of this community for several years, I did notice the student body. Particularly, there was a shift towards a lot more liberal students coming in. I would talk about it with my friends. It was something that we all started to really pick up on. Ronald Reagan famously said that freedom is never more than one generation away from being lost, and I think that same principle applies to what we're seeing here at Liberty University, where you have to. It's a work in progress to preserve it constantly, or it could very easily slip out of our hands. So what is the Freedom Center doing? How important is it that this center is here in this time, as a lot of students are worried about a growing liberal presence at Liberty University?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is that the fact that Liberty University hosts the Standing for Freedom Center, has the Standing for Freedom Center here, I think should be a comfort to a lot of people who are questioning where Liberty stands. Liberty is a conservative institution, remains so. It is a stalwart conservative institution. Within the university project, one has to be reminded of the fact that there is academic freedom. There is going to be a little bit of wiggle room as professors negotiate where they can be. We are guided by some missional principles. We talk often about training champions for Christ, but it's important to be reminded that Liberty University is a confessional institution as well. So there is actually a doctrinal statement and a statement of faith. We don't always live up to that doctrinal statement perfectly, but we're always called to put our toes back to the line. So as the Standing for Freedom Center exists here, I believe one of our missional directives is to remind people of the vision and the practice of the founder, Dr. Jerry Falwell Sr. There was never a time in which Liberty University was not committed to the Great Commission. There was never a time in which Liberty University was not committed to being a voice in the public square. Always and forever, unapologetically, and oftentimes in a very controversial way, not controversial morally, ethically, but certainly controversial in terms of the eyes of secularists and militants and radicals. So we have a wide variety of students that come in. This is an open campus to many applicants. Not all of them are coming in the name of Jesus, right? A lot of them are coming in the name of, I want a good education. I want to go to a safe campus. I want to be at a place where, it's going to help me in my career, professional career. I want to have a fast track to getting credentialed so I can go out and work, and earn a living. So people come here for a variety of reasons. Not all of them are kingdom focused, kingdom minded. Not all of them are Christians. So I think that it serves them well that while they're here, some of them are being shepherded for the first time in their life. They've not been in a church before. So they're actually being trained up and shepherded along. Now you and I know there's soul freedom. Everybody has a free will. In terms of their response to the gospel, some people are not going to accept the gospel. But while they're here, they're certainly going to be exposed to the gospel and to gospel preaching, gospel teaching. So missionally, we have this directive that we're trying to obviously do an in-reach to our students. We're trying to do an outreach as well to the larger public. The caliber of student is also the challenge today. And when I say caliber, I don't mean the talents or the intellectual credibility or anything like that. I'm not talking about their CV or their bona fides or anything like that. What I'm saying is a K through 12 education that is largely secular, post-Christian, where they don't have biblical worldview, they don't have doctrine, their minds have not been shaped by the scriptures. One of the greatest challenges that Liberty has today, as well as the Standing for Freedom Center, is to articulate in a way that is intelligible, coherent, largely to a younger generation that has less of those foundations of biblical knowledge, biblical understanding. We have to be able to communicate to them the essential gospel, and sometimes it's for the first time. They've never heard it before. That's the kind of education that they're getting K through 12 before they ever come here. It's one of the greatest challenges moving forward as we as an institution continue to gain footing and trying to figure out what is the new direction going to look like, not as the institution, but as a country. What is the direction going to look like for the next 5, 10, or even 15 years, and how do we respond to those challenges?
Over the years, Liberty has thankfully been one of the very few exceptions to the downfall of academia that we're seeing more broadly in the country, and even in lower ed, K through 12 schools too, where we're seeing radical progressivism through transgender ideology, socialism, globalism, you name it, that's happening. What do you think the future of, given all of those problems that we're seeing and how bad it has become, what do you think the future of academia is? And that seems to be something that the conservative movement is a little split on. Half of them say, pull out of the public education system, let it implode on itself. The other half says, no, we can stay here. We can still fix this. It may be damaged, but it's not completely broken yet. What is your take on that? Obviously, Liberty is a private university, but even other private schools around the country have sadly fallen prey to radical leftism. So what do you think the future looks like for education? Well,
there's a lot of structural questions. What does the future of federal funding look like for education? When you think about the bubbles often that the federal programming creates in the market, there's no question that federal loan programs have created a huge ballooning debt in our nation. It's anywhere between $1.5 and $2 trillion. But educational institutions that have been propped up largely through debt funding, that their programs are not concurrent with the needs of the market. So the marketplace is great because it's supply and demand. The marketplace can oftentimes determine the value of a degree and why it would be important. We classically joke the underwater basket weaving program, or the radical gender studies, right? Those are actually, the radical gender studies programs are all across this country. It's crazy. I mean, they have queer theology at the School of Chicago, right? University of Chicago. Who would get a degree in queer theology? And who would get a job with that degree? It's insane. But because of federal entitlements, federal loan programs, and the rest, they've created this bubble within education that is not. It's neither the old classical model of education, where education was all about virtue and ethics and understanding the Word of God and all of that, creating a moral citizenry. And then you think about the more modern example, which is all about credentialing for a job. It's all about the job. It's all about the job. The DR, the PhD, the JD, all of those things are important. So the university is undergoing, and I say the university, I don't mean Liberty University, but the university in America is undergoing significant challenges. What does the future look like? I think the technological disruptions in the market, and we've capitalized on that here at Liberty through Liberty's online program, one of the largest in the world, in fact. And by the way, that includes K through 12 education. So if mom and dad are thinking I'd love to find a way to, I can't put in the local private school, it's too expensive. Maybe there's an option and a way to do that with homeschooling through our online program. We offer that as well. That's growing significantly. But the market and the technological disruptions that have come along the way have actually provided, I think, a proper check and balance to the waywardness of academic institutions. I believe it was this year. I don't know what study this came up through, but enrollment is down across the nation by 500,000 students. That would not surprise me. And it's largely because they're not seeing the reward of actually going to school. The other part of it is, as soon as they do go to these institutions, they're faced immediately with mandate, lockdown. A lot of them go for that experience, and they're not going to get it at a college campus. You do at Liberty University. And so we maintain the most open and free institution probably here in the United States. And so we encourage people to come. But the biggest challenge, I think, is what the technological disruptions will bring to bear over the next 5 to 10 years. I think it will be a great opportunity for freedom. I think it will be a terrible moment of challenge and crisis for these federal programs and for universities that have been ballooned by debt, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I'm talking about the dropout rate, or the college attendance rate dropping. Most of those are young, are males. Most of those are young men. So we also see this issue of,
it's frightening.
This stereotype of straight white Christian male is kind of the new devil in today's
the devil's
society.
Becoming a dinosaur. And so when you think of that, Addison, that's a great point. One of the first things that happens with young females, if young females get married, there are childbearing years. The statistics are they're going to have children and they likely exit the market unless they are the primary breadwinner because they've got the degree and the husband doesn't. I think it's going to lead to a huge crisis in the next 5 to 10 years. So I don't see it as a good thing that young men are exiting the university system. I think that'll have a much greater impact on the labor market in the years to come. But this is just, again, progeny is destiny, demography is destiny. You can't overcome the fact, this is part of the brave new world that we live in. Women can do everything that a man can do and more, according to radical feminism. And this is radical feminism. I'm not talking about biblical femininity or complementarianism. But because of that, I think it's leading to a host of there's a backlash culturally and a host of cultural and societal problems. And one of those is that men are often seen and made to feel as though they are the villain, they're the culprit behind every single societal problem. And they're not encouraged then to take the reins of leadership. Instead, they need to huddle over in the corner and be quiet while every major victim group comes forward and speaks the most loudly in the room. Because of that, I think that you are seeing a drop-off demographically of otherwise very healthy young men who should be seeking to pursue education for their future, especially when you think about the professional class of working people, doctors, lawyers, everything else. Those guys are going to have 30 and 40, 50 years of work ahead of them. They don't exit the marketplace when children are born, right? They stay in the marketplace to be the primary breadwinners. So I think this is going to lead to possibly significant economic disruption down the road if it continues that way.
I want to close with one final question, because the Virginia governor election just ended. Glenn Youngkin will be the next governor of Virginia. And it seems that one thing that really drove Virginians out to the polls was the issue of education.
Yeah.
You had Terry McAuliffe saying, the state is going to be in charge of education and parents have no say whatsoever. I'm going to see to it that that's the case. And then Glenn Youngkin took the approach of parents, have a right to be involved in their child's education. Do you think seeing that dramatic shift, just last year Joe Biden won the state of Virginia by 10 or so points, and now Virginia has flipped red. Do you think that education is possibly the new winning message for conservatives? We have the pro-life ethic, we have all these different approaches that we take, but now we're starting to see education might be one of the winners that gets people motivated and gathers momentum. Do you think that that's the case?
I think so. I would love to drill down specifically what parents like in Loudoun County and other parts of Virginia feel about education. Is it a problem that needs to be slightly remedied, slightly finessed, and then we just keep rolling forward? Or is it something that fundamentally needs to be broken down and radically changed? I'm for the latter. But there are some that are more moderate and even more left-leaning that are for the former. Just let's slap a Band-Aid on it, right? And we'll keep going. The problem is that we have disparate viewpoints now when it comes to worldview, when it comes to what a healthy, safe, and functioning society looks like, what the needs of a young person is in their early childhood development and educational formation and all of that. What is the most essential? And for many Christian parents, they would say absolutely there is no way, it is completely incompatible to have a secular worldview alongside with a biblical worldview, and they cohabitate the same educational space, the same educational philosophy, the same classroom, the same rules, all of that. It doesn't work, and it's been proven since Madalyn Marie O'Hair and all the rest in the 1960s with all the different educational reforms taking God, religion, morality out of public schools. The only time in which you see any kind of religious expression might come from a student group. It might come from a chaplain who prays before a basketball or a football game, maybe, if that. But by and large, I think the greatest difficulty you're seeing right now is the two not being able to cohabitate. And by the way, they're two religious viewpoints. Secularism is a religion. So this Youngkin election, I think, exposed the reality that parents are absolutely alarmed by the radical nature of the new left. Obviously with critical race theory, which was decades in the making. This is not new. Any intellectual out there, I was exposed to critical race theory 20 years ago at the University of Texas. Largely the left-wing media is lying about how pervasive it is in the educational system, how pervasive it is K through 12, not just in secondary and post-secondary education. But it came about in the late 1960s, 1970s, David Bell, right, and influenced Harvard law, and then the legal theory became a social theory that started to trickle down within the educational institutions because, by and large, those who are more liberal end up becoming teachers. No offense to any of the teachers who might be listening to this. I love teachers, and there are many great conservative ones. But if you're looking at the ideological makeup of the educational system, by and large, it is more liberal or left-leaning teachers that are out there. So what's interesting is that the Youngkin campaign exposed, I think, something that many Americans are hungry for. They're hungry for truth. They want to have choice and options when it comes to their children's education. It remains to be seen, but it'd be interesting to see if this leads to a national wave going into 2022. Certainly right now, it's a winning issue among Republicans. This is something that even if you go back to the Bush administration in the early 2000s, Condoleezza Rice, fellow at the Hoover Institute, now she's the director there, she said this is one of the single most issues that affects equality in this country. Not the equality of outcome, but the equality of opportunity is education. Thomas Sewell, Walter Williams, they've been writing on these issues for decades now, and the impact on African American minority communities is having access to a good education. Choice is the only thing that's going to do that. It's not going to be the NEA, it's not going to be the NSBA, or any of these organizations that we can put more tax dollars into. In fact, it will need a disruption in order to lead to the freest and best outcome.
I'd say the rounding of a person as a whole, a lot of that is attributed to the education system they go through. They, K through 12, you're in a school 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, not 8-9 months out of the year, and then you're sent off to college for 4 years. So I do think that a lot of the root problems we're seeing in the culture today do stem from the abuse we're seeing in our education system.
Absolutely.
But I'll leave it with that. Ryan Helfenbein, thank you so much for coming on and joining us to talk. Very insightful.
Hey, thanks, Addison.
If you guys enjoyed that interview, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, leave a comment, hit that subscribe button. If you're not already, make sure you're following us at Campus Reform on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.